Mwai Kibaki was born on 15th November 1931. Is a Kenyan politician who was the third president of Kenya, serving from December 2002 until April 2013. Kibaki was born in 1931 in Dunguri village, Othaya division of Kenya's then Nyeri district, now Nyeri County. He is the youngest son of Kikuyu peasants Kibaki Githinji and Teresia Wanjiku. Though baptized as Emilion Stanley by Italian missionaries in his youth, he has been known as Mwai Kibaki throughout his public life. Family oral history maintains that his early education was made possible by his much older brother-in-law, Paul Murudhi, who insisted that young Mwai should go to school instead of spending his days grazing his father's sheep and cattle and babysitting his little nephews and nieces for his older sister. Kibaki turned out to be an exemplary student. He attended Gatuyani School for the first 2 years, where he completed what was called Sub-A and Sub-B, the equivalent of Standard 1 and 2. He later joined Karima Mission School for 3 more classes of primary school. He later moved to Bahari School, now Nyeri High School, between 1944 and 1946 for Standard 4 to Standard 6, where in addition to his academic studies, he learned carpentry and masonry as students would repair furniture and provide material for maintaining the school's buildings. He also grew his own food as all students in the school were expected to do, and earned extra money during the school holidays by working as a conductor on buses operated by defunct Othaya African Bus Union. After Karima Primary and Nyeri boarding primary schools, he proceeded to Mangu High School, where he studied between 1947 and 1950. He passed with a maximum of 6 points in his O-level examination by passing 6 subjects with grade 1 distinction. Kibaki attended Makerere University in Kampala, Uganda, where he studied economics, history and political science, and graduated best in his class in 1955 with a first-class honors degree in economics. After his graduation, Kibaki took up an appointment as assistant sales manager, Shell Company of East Africa, Uganda Division. During the same year, he earned a scholarship entitling him to postgraduate studies in any British university. He consequently enrolled at prestigious London School of Economics for a bachelor's degree in public finance, graduating with a distinction. He went back to Makerere in 1958, where he taught as an assistant lecturer in the economics department until 1961. In 1961, Kibaki married Lucy Muthoni, the daughter of a church minister who was then a secondary school ed teacher. In early 1960, Mwai Kibaki left academia for active politics by giving up his job at Makerere and returning to Kenya to become executive officer of the Kenya African National Union. At the request of Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, who went on to become Kenya's first vice president, Kibaki then helped to draft the Kenya's independence constitution. In 1963, Kibaki was appointed the permanent secretary for Treasury, appointed assistant minister of finance and chairman of the Economic Planning Commission in 1963. He was promoted to Minister of Commerce and Industry in 1966. In 1969, he became Minister of Finance and Economic Planning, where he served until 1982. In 1974, Kibaki facing serious competition from his Donholm constituency seat from Mrs. Jael Mbago, whom he had narrowly and controversially beaten for the seat in 1969 elections, moved his political base from Nairobi to his rural home, Othaya, where he was subsequently elected as Member of the Parliament. The same year, Time magazine rated him among the top 100 people in the world who had been potential to lead. He has been re-elected Member of the Parliament for Othaya in the subsequent elections in 1979, 1983, 1988, 1992, 1997, 2002 and 2007. When Daniel Arap Moi succeeded Jomo Kenyatta as President of Kenya in 1978, Kibaki was elevated to Vice Presidency and kept the finance portfolio until Moi changed his ministerial portfolio from finance to home affairs in 1982. When Kibaki was the Minister of the Finance, Kenya enjoyed a period of relative prosperity, fueled by a commodities boom, especially coffee, with a remarkable fiscal discipline and sound monetary policies. Kibaki fell out of favor with President Moi in March 1988 and was dropped as the vice president and moved to the Ministry of Health. In the months before multi-party politics were introduced in 1992, he infamously declared the agitating for multi-party democracy and trying to dislodge KANU from the power, like trying to cut down a fig tree with a razor blade. It was therefore with great surprise that the country received the news of Kibaki's resignation from the government and leaving KANU on Christmas Day in December 1991, only days after the repeal of the Section 2A of the Constitution, which restored a multi-party system of government. Soon after his resignation, Kibaki founded the Democratic Party and entered the presidential race in the upcoming multi-party elections in 1992. Soon after his resignation, Kibaki founded the Democratic Party and entered the presidential race in the upcoming multi-party elections in 1992. Kibaki came third in the subsequent presidential elections of 1992, when the divided opposition lost to President Moi and KANU despite having received more than two-thirds of the vote. He then came second to Moi in the 1997 elections, when again Moi beat a divided opposition to retain the presidency. In January 1998, Kibaki became the leader of the official opposition, with the Democratic Party being the official opposition party in parliament. In preparation for the 2002 elections, Kibaki's Democratic Party affiliated with several other opposition parties to form National Alliance Rainbow Coalition. A group of disappointed KANU presidential aspirants then quit KANU in protest after being overlooked by the outgoing President Moi when Moi had founding father Jomo Kenyatta's son, Uhuru Kenyatta. Nominated to be the KANU presidential candidate and hurriedly formed the Liberal Democratic Party, NAC later combined with the LDP to form the National Rainbow Coalition. On 14th October 2002, at a large opposition rally in Uhuru Park, Nairobi, Kibaki was nominated as NAC Opposition Alliance presidential candidate after Raila Odinga made the famous declaration Kibaki Tosha. On that December 2002, Kibaki was injured in a road accident while on his way back to Nairobi from a campaign meeting at Machakos Junction, 40 kilometers away from Nairobi. He was subsequently hospitalized in Nairobi, then London, after sustaining fracture injuries in the accident. He still walks rather awkwardly as a result of those injuries. The rest of his presidential campaign was thus conducted by his NAC colleagues in his absence, led by Raila Odinga and Kijana Wamalwa, who went on to become the vice president, who campaigned tirelessly for Kibaki after stating the captain has been injured in the field, but the rest of the team shall continue. On 27 December 2002, Kibaki and NAC won landslide victory over KANU, with Kibaki getting 62% of the votes in the presidential elections against only 31% for the KANU candidate Uhuru Kenyatta. On 29 December 2002, still nursing injuries from the motor vehicle accident, in a wheelchair, Mwai Kibaki was sworn in as the third president and commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the Republic of Kenya. At his inauguration, he stressed his opposition to government corruption, saying, "Government will no longer run on the whims of individuals." President Kibaki's style was that of a low-key, publicity-averse but highly intelligent and competent technocrat. He, unlike his predecessors, never tried to establish a personality cult, never had his portrait on every unit of Kenya's currency, never had all manner of streets, places and institutions named after him, never had the state-sanctioned praise songs composed in his honor, never dominated news bulletins with reports of his presidential activities. In January 2003, Kibaki introduced a free primary education initiative, which brought over 1 million children who would not have been able to afford school the chance to attend. The initiative received positive attention, including praise from Bill Clinton, who will travel to Kenya to meet Kibaki. The 2005 Kenyan Constitution referendum was held on 21st November 2005. The main issue of contention in the constitution review process was how much power should be vested in the Kenyan presidency. In previous draft, those who feared a concentration of power in the president added provisions for European-style power sharing between a ceremonial president elected via universal suffrage and an executive prime minister elected by parliament. The draft presented by Attorney General Amos Wako for referendum retained sweeping powers for the presidency. On 26 January 2007, President Kibaki declared his intention of running for re-election in the 2007 presidential election. On 16 September 2007, Kibaki announced that he will stand as a candidate of a new alliance incorporating all the parties who supported his re-election, called the Party of the National Unity. The parties in his alliance included the much diminished former ruling KANU, Democratic Party, NARC Kenya, Ford People, and Shirikisho. Kibaki's main opponent, Raila Odinga, had used the referendum victory to launch the ODM, which nominated him as presidential candidate for the 2007 elections. On 30th September 2007, a robust and much healthier President Kibaki launched his presidential campaign at Nyayo Stadium in Nairobi. Kalonzo Musyoka then broke away from Raila's ODM to mount his own fringe bid for the presidency, thus narrowing down the contest between the main candidates Kibaki and the incumbent Raila Odinga. Opinion polls up to the election day showed Kibaki behind Raila Odinga nationally but closing. On regional analysis, the polls showed him behind Raila Odinga in all regions of the country except Central Province, Embu and Meru, where he projected to take most of the votes, and behind Kalonzo Musyoka in Kalonzo's native Ukambani. It was thus projected to be a close election between Kibaki and Raila Odinga. The election was held on 27 December 2007. Kibaki won and was sworn in what remains to be a contentious issue at twilight. 3 days later, after a protracted count which saw presidential results in Kibaki's central Kenya come in last, allegedly inflated in a cloud of suspicion and rising tensions amid vehement protests by Raila's ODM. Overnight, retelling of the results and chaotic scenes, all beamed live on TV at the National Tallying Center at the Kenyatta International Conference Center in Nairobi. Riot police eventually sealed off the tallying center ahead of the results announcement, evicted party agents, observers and the media, and moved the chairman of the Electoral Commission, Samuel Kivoitu, to another room where Kivoitu went on to declare Kibaki the winner by 4.5 million votes to Odinga's 4.3 million, placing Kibaki ahead of Raila Odinga by 232,000 votes in the hotly contested election, with Kalonzo Musyoka a distant third. 1 hour later, in a hastily convened dusk ceremony, Kibaki was sworn in at the grounds of State House, Nairobi, for his second term, definitely calling for the verdict of the people to be respected and for healing and reconciliation to begin. These aroused tension and led to protests by a huge number of Kenyans who felt that Kibaki had refused to respect the verdict of the people and was now forcibly remaining in office. Immediately, the results were announced. Odinga bitterly accused Kibaki of electoral fraud. Odinga's allegations scored with his supporters and seemed meritorious since the results had defied the pre-election polls and expectations and election day exit polls. Furthermore, Odinga, who had campaigned against the concentration of political power in the hands of Kikuyu politicians, had won the votes of the most of the other Kenyan tribes and regions, with Kibaki's victory being attained only with the near-exclusive support of the populous Kikuyu, Meru and Embu communities, who had turned out to vote for the Kibaki in large numbers after feeling in reaction to the Odinga campaign and with the covert encouragement of the Kibaki campaign increasingly besieged and threatened by the pro-Odinga tribes. Moreover, ODM had won the most parliamentary and local authority seats by the wide margin. A joint statement by the British Foreign Office and Department for International Development cited real concerns over irregularities, while international observers refused to declare the election free and fair. It was reported that Kibaki, who had previously been perceived as an old-school gentleman, had revealed a steely side. When he swore himself in within an hour of being announced the victor of the highly contested election, Odinga supporters said they will be declared president at the Varo ceremony on Monday, but police banned the event. Koki Muli, the head of local watchdog, the Institute of Education in Democracy, called the day saddest in the history of democracy in the country. Opposition supporters saw the results as a plot by Kibaki'S Kikuyu tribe, Kenya's largest to keep power by any means. The tribes that lost the election were upset at the prospect of 5 years without political power, and anti-Kikuyu sentiment swelled, spawning the 2007-2008 Kenyan crisis as violence broke out in several places in the country, started by the ODM supporters protesting the stealing of their victory and subsequently escalating as targeted Kikuyus retaliated. As unrest spread, television and radio stations were instructed to stop all the live broadcast. There was widespread theft, vandalism, looting and destruction of property, and significant number of atrocities, killings, and sexual violence reported. The violence continued for more than 2 months as Kibaki rolled with half a cabinet he appointed, with Odinga and ODM refusing to recognize him as the president. When the election was eventually investigated by the Independent Review Commission on the 2007 elections chaired by Justice Joanne Kriegler, it was found that there were too many electoral malpractices from several regions perpetrated by all contesting parties to conclusively establish which candidate won the December 2007 presidential elections. Such malpractices included widespread bribery, vote buying, intimidation and ballot stuffing by both sides, as well as incompetence from the Electoral Commission of Kenya, which was shortly thereafter disbanded by the new parliament. The country was only saved by mediation of former United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan, with a panel of eminent African personalities backed by the African Union, the United States, and the United Kingdom. Following the mediation, a deal called the National Accord was signed in February 2008 between Raila Odinga and Kibaki, now referred to as two principals. The accord, later passed by the Kenyan Parliament as the National Accord and Reconciliation Act in 2008, provided inter alia for power sharing, with Kibaki remaining president and Raila Odinga taking a newly recreated post of a prime minister. On 17 April 2008, Raila Odinga was sworn in as the prime minister along with a power-sharing cabinet, with 42 ministers and 50 assistant ministers, Kenya's largest ever. The cabinet was 50% Kibaki-appointed ministers and 50% Raila-appointed ministers, and was reality and a carefully balanced ethnic coalition. The arrangement, which also included Kalonzo Musyoka as vice president, was known as the Grand Coalition Government. The Kibaki presidency set itself the main task of reviving and turning around the country after years of stagnation and economic mismanagement during the Moi years, a feat faced with several challenges including the aftermath of the Nyayo era, Western donor fatigue, the president's ill health during the first term, political tension culminating in the breakup of the NARC coalition, the 2007-2008 post-election violence, the 2007-2008 global financial crisis, and 10 years relationship with the coalition partner Raila Odinga during his second term. President Kibaki, the economist whose term as a finance minister in the 1970s is widely celebrated as outstanding, did much as president to repair the damage done to the country's economy during the 24-year reign of his predecessor, President Moi. Compared to Moi years, Kenya was much better managed by far more competent public sector personnel and was much transformed. Development was resumed in all areas of the country, including the hitherto neglected and largely underdeveloped semi-arid and arid north. Many sectors of the economy recovered from total collapse pre-2003. Numerous state corporations that had collapsed during the Moi years were revived and have begun performing profitably. The telecommunications sector boomed. Rebuilding, modernization, and expansion of the infrastructure began in earnest, with several ambitious infrastructural and other projects such as the Thika Superhighway, which will have been seen as unattainable during the Moi years, completed. The country's cities and towns began being positively renewed and transformed. The Constituency Development Fund (CDF) was introduced in 2003. The fund was designed to support constituency-level grassroots development projects. It was aimed to achieve equitable distribution of development resources across regions and to control imbalances in regional development brought about by partisan politics. It targeted all constituency-level development projects, particularly those aiming to combat poverty at the grassroots. The CDF program has facilitated the putting up of new water, health and education facilities in all parts of the country, including remote areas that were usually overlooked during funds allocation in the national budget. CDF was the first step towards the devolved system of government introduced by the 2010 Constitution, by which local government structures were constitutionally redesigned, enhanced and strengthened. President Kibaki also oversaw the creation of Kenya's Vision 2030, a long-term development plan aimed at raising the GDP growth to 10% annually and transforming Kenya into a middle-income country by 2030, which he unveiled on 30th October 2006. The Kibaki regime also saw a reduction of Kenya's dependence on Western donor aid, with the country being increasingly funded by internally generated resources such as increased tax revenue collection. Relations with China, Japan and other Western powers improved and expanded remarkably in the Kibaki years. China and Japan, especially the Asian tigers such as Malaysia and Singapore, Brazil, the Middle East, and to a lesser extent South Africa, Libya and other African countries, and even Iran became increasingly important economic partners. Though President Kibaki was never personally accused of corruption and managed to virtually end the grabbing of the public land rampant in the Moi and Kenyatta eras, he was unable to adequately contain Kenya's widely entrenched culture of endemic corruption. In 2004, the media reported that Kibaki has a second spouse, whom he allegedly married under customary law, Mary Wamboi, and a daughter Wangoi Mwai. State House in response released an unsigned statement that Kibaki's only immediate family at the time was his then-wife Lucy and the 4 children. In 2009, Kibaki, with Lucy in a close attendance, held an odd press conference to restate publicly that he has only one wife, the matter of Kibaki's alleged mistrust, and his wife's usually dramatic public reactions thereto provided an embarrassing sideshow during his presidency. Kibaki enjoys playing golf and is a member of the Muthaiga Golf Club. He is practicing and very committed member of the Roman Catholic Church and attends Consolata Shrines Catholic Church in Nairobi every Sunday at noon. On 21st August 2016, Kibaki was ill and was taken to Karen Hospital and later flown to South Africa for specialized treatment. There was panic in the country as Kibaki joined the late Arap Moi at the Nairobi hospital.